evening, everyone, and welcome to An Evening with Luna Press. Tonight, I am delighted to welcome you for the book launch of Cast Along Shadows by Cat Hellisen. Welcome, Cat, and here is the baby. How are you, Cat?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing?
Oh, very well. Thank you very much. All righty. So let's start this evening together. Now, Cast Along Shadows is Kat's latest fantasy novel, which is going to be released on the 31st of May. Now, before we go any further, I am Francesca Barbini. For those of you that don't know me yet, and I would like for Kat to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Cat Hellisen, and I'm a writer originally from South Africa, but I moved to Scotland 5 years ago, and now I guess I'm a Scot African writer, and I write fantasy.
Absolutely.
Mostly darkish fantasy.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Excellent. So, well, since we are talking about fantasy, then Kat, was fantasy, darkish fantasy, but fantasy your favorite genre? What you've always written, or have you been perhaps changing as well on and off over the years?
I've always loved fantasy. Weirdly, I started reading mostly horror and science fiction as a child, and then started reading fantasy. But fantasy is the thing that's always pulled me, and it's the stuff that I like the most because you can play with so much. You can pull in the horror, you can pull in the science fiction, you can do all these things, and I guess that's what I like doing.
Oh,
I just
yeah. Listen, in terms of did you have like a favorite fantasy book when you were growing up as a child?
Well, as a child, and as I kind of found my own things that I love to read, because originally the as a child, obviously I used to read a lot of animal fantasy.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I think it's William Horwood with his Duncton moles and stuff like that. Those are my favorite things, Watership Down. And from there I found quite lush, quite queer fantasy through people like Tanith Lee and Clive Barker.
Yes.
More of his fantasy stuff than his horror stuff. So those were the things that influenced me. Very, very lush, very strange and beautiful writing. Fantasy that wasn't just, and I've got nothing against wizards and elves, don't get me wrong. I love I love the Hobbits, I love Lord of the Rings, but something that wasn't that fantasy. So I think that's what drew me the most.
Oh, absolutely. I was wondering now, because obviously, like yourself, I also left Italy and moved to Scotland. I never thought I would start Luna Press, for example, but I can certainly notice the way I've changed in terms of my writing. When I started writing young adult science fiction, for example. So yes, I can definitely tell my style has changed because we don't live in a vacuum. You know, we are influenced by the new culture. Have you noticed changes in your style of writing since moving to Scotland from when you were in South Africa?
There's no doubt that things do influence your surroundings, and the people around you influence you. For me, actually, I like the sea. So the sea is my biggest influence. Yeah. So it'll come through. It's perhaps not so much in this book, but water tends to get into all my books. So I've always lived by the ocean, and even here in Scotland, I'm quite close. Well, I'm close to the Firth, Forth. So it's not quite an ocean, but we'll get there. We'll pretend it is.
Perfect.
It's water, and that has definitely at least been like a constant. So, but yeah, the lack of sun and the grayness and the cold has definitely influenced some of my settings. And nettles and all the jaggies. But yeah, just the different way people talk, the different rhythms of people's language influences how you write dialogue. And I think one of the things that when I first moved here, and I'd come from a country that had just come from a drought. And so, as I say, water is very important in my books. And then I came here and I'm walking around and everything's green, 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 green. And I realized this is where the fairies, well, now I understand why they were fairies in like old myths and legends that came from Scotland, because I can believe that they were running around in those forests and woods. They're understandable. Whereas we don't really have the huge, like foresty, green, moss hanging kind of forests. So yeah, that sort of thing has definitely influenced the settings for my books, I think.
And what do you remember about the genre scene in South Africa when you left? What was it like?
Oh, well, actually, it was great for me. I had a really lovely group of people that I would quite regularly not have writers' meetings with, but kind of gatherings of writers where we would bounce ideas off each other. And there's a lot of inspiration in that sense, which is hard to find in a new country when you move, to find that sort of thing. People were doing interesting things because the scene is very small there. And big publishers are not that interested in voices from outside of America and the UK. It's less likely that they get published by the big publishers, but there are plenty of people writing really, really interesting stuff. And obviously now there's a bit of distance. I'm not as active and I miss a lot of the things that are happening, but just from what I can see, people are still doing really cool things. So yeah, I mean, I miss that aspect of it. I'm hoping that more voices will get heard eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's true. You know, when you were talking before about obviously moving and arriving into a new country, you know, I had this conversation with Pooja Mittal Biswas, who is one of our authors. She lives in Australia. Now, she was born in Nigeria from Indian
Yeah.
parents, and she's now living in Australia. And we had that conversation because she wrote a book about the diaspora, essentially, but writing Indian mythology in the diaspora. And we had that encounter where essentially we were both realizing that people like us, you know, you leave your own country behind, so your brain in a sense remains stuck to that time period and experience of your country in the past. Then you live another life in a new country, and then you find yourself almost like an amalgam of two realities.
Oh, yeah.
Which are not necessarily reflecting either Italy that it is today, in my case, or Scotland as it is for the Scottish people, because you come and you mesh them all up together and you create this entire new culture in a sense, and writing style, of course, in that sense. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, 100%, because as you say, the country you left behind is the past. It's a foreign country now. And if you go back, it's a different country. Things have moved on without you, but you still grew up there and you still have the way you speak, the little stupid things that you say, and no one knows what you're talking about because you're so used to, you know, people understanding you. And then you come to Scotland and no one knows what you mean. But as you say, then you're in Scotland and you amalgamate and you try, you know, fit in better, but you're still not really 100% Scottish, and you never will be. So you're this weird mix of things. And as you say, neither is correct. But yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of a joy in that, because like one of my favorite words, and it is a bit of a precious word, is liminal. And I think people like us get to live in the liminal spaces, yes, in the in-between bits. So I'm not South African and I'm not Scottish. I'm something in between that. That's kind of fun.
It is.
And if I make a terrible faux pas, I can just blame it on being foreign, which is great.
Absolutely.
I did not understand that. I have no idea what I just said. I've just read the Libraries of Edinburgh. What is it called?
Tendai Huchu.
Yeah, Tendai Huchu. What was the book
it's called? The Library of the Dead.
Library of the Dead, yeah, the Edinburgh one.
Yes.
And that was great fun because I think he's obviously got the same thing coming from Africa as well, and then being in Scotland, and it was really fun reading his version of Edinburgh that was both a future Edinburgh and dystopian but with magic, but also from a kind of outsider's perspective, in that
Yes.
like their family is from Africa. So that was great. I think there's lots of people doing that kind of thing.
That's right. And I actually love that very much. And one thing I really particularly like is when a book is set in a city that I know well, and they're actually mentioning areas and streets, etc. And that was actually something that happened with Francesco Verso Bloodbusters, which is set in Rome. And of course, Francesco is in Rome. I'm from Rome. So for me, reading that book with all the streets and everything, it actually made the book a lot richer because I could, I could recognize a lot of places. And with Tendai's book as well, I love the fact that I was able to recognize, a lot of the areas and Calton Hill and Wester Hills and everything. It's like it's great. So yeah, it makes you even more part of the book, I suppose.
Yes, it's lovely. Yeah, no, so he's doing stuff like that. And I think there are spaces for people like you, like me, who are kind of not a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah.
So we do our
Absolutely. Let's shake things up. Yeah.
yeah.
That was a good Elvis voice over there, away from my normal Mario Bros voice. So there you go. Oh, fabulous. Okay, then, right. Let's talk about Cast Long Shadows. So first of all, right, we need to set the scene, right? So can you tell us a little bit about what the book is about and also what inspired you to write this beautiful novel? And, I'm just going to show it again because it's so gorgeous. And we're going to talk in a minute about Tara Bush, amazing art, okay? But let's get starting from the beginning. Tell us about the book, Kat.
Well, I love doing retellings. I love it. I like to say the reason why I like retellings is because I'm unable to come up with my own plots. So, so I like to take a plot that someone else has already done and then just do my version of it, which is a bit of a lie and a bit of a truth. But yeah, so it started off as a retelling. I went and I dug up my old files and I started it in June of 2014.
Oh, wow, goodness.
Where it was literally just called Snow White. Mm-hmm. And I decided I was going to rewrite Snow White from the stepmother's point of view. Because I thought, the women are always getting called witches when we don't do what we're told to do, kind of thing. And I thought, why is this woman the witch? Why is the stepmother the witch? What made her the witch? And I thought, what if she's a witch, but she's not actually magic? It's just what they called her. Yeah. And then, of course, I started digging into how does the magic work and how does this all affect her? And definitely there was this idea of a girl who wanted very much to be seen on the same level as a man. Like in the beginning, you certainly notice that she's sort of very disparaging about the other woman in her family, about her mother, about her sister. Not disparaging, but she kind of feels like if she gets her father's approval, she becomes more than them.
Yep.
And it was this reality comes crashing down is that you're never going to get this approval and you're never going to be more than them. And that was all these little bits and pieces started feeding into what eventually became Cast Long Shadows. Was this just being a woman in a world that was very much run by men in power. And I think we can still, to this day, relate to it, even though it's a medieval-ish fantasy. Yes. I think there's a lot there that hasn't changed.
It's true.
So,
it's true.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And you've done so in such a compelling and transporting way. I must say, that we were just about to close the submissions. It was during one of Luna Press opening for novels. And I remember literally towards the end, I just remember seeing this tweet about the book on Twitter about your book. And I was like, no, send it. And
too long. And I was like, oh, mine's too long, but no subs are closing. So send yours in instead. Yeah. And then you were.
I kid you not. And these are, I don't know, do they say serendipity? I mean, it was just one of those moments of perfect timing of everything at once. And then, reading the book and really discovering your writing style and the lyrics. And I mean, you've been published before by Newcomb Press, by other magazines. So you've been in really, Shoreline of Infinity, award-winning presses. So you've done an amazing job already so far, and and just to discover another layer as well to you, it was such a joy. And we're delighted to welcome you into the Luna family with Cast Long Shadows. So it was perfect timing.
Thank you.
So we mentioned the cover. Now, before we go any further, I think it's time for you to enjoy a little time with Tara Bush, magnificent artwork for Cast Long Shadows. Beautiful cover by Tara Bush. You might have seen Tara's work on Black Static as well. She has an amazing website. She loves portraits. They're very realistic, really, really strong and full of intensity. So I would certainly recommend that anybody go check Tara's website, and I have put the link in the description so you can check directly from here. Now, Kat, you are also an artist. I love to watch your work. I love to watch your sketches, as they appear and as they come. You've done portraits as well. Loads of lovely things. So you obviously have an artistic eye. And oh, you do. But and I would love to, obviously to hear what were the things that you love the most about this cover from Tara. Yes.
I actually remember having a conversation with you because I think the one thing that we wanted to get across was that this was not a YA book. And we wanted to make sure the cover reflected that. And you mentioned a couple of people that were artists you liked working with. And when I saw Tara's art, I was like, well, that's the one. I don't know if you remember this conversation. Yeah. So I saw Tara's art. I was like, yep, definitely this is the artist I want to go with, because she's got this almost dreamy kind of darkness to her work.
Yes.
It's not surreal, but it feels like you're in a place that's not really there. And I thought that really captures the kind of feel that I like.
It's that kind of liminality that we were talking about before, the liminality as well.
It's this place that's dark and just slightly off, like it's hazy and dreamy. And I thought, that's it. That's the art I want. And I thought she did a fantastic job. And if you read the book, you'll notice there's a little salamander. So hopefully people will spot that and see what that is in the book. I was very happy when I saw the artist.
But it was great. When people get to the end of the book, what we're going to have a competition, because we're going to have people looking at the cover after reading the book and finding not just the salamander, but there are so many little details that Tara has spread and hidden.
I can spot what they are.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I'm gonna zip because I think I can.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, well, we are now at the time of the reading, and so I'm gonna ask Kat to take us into the book, and I believe we are right at the beginning in the first chapter.
Yeah, I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning, and then I'm going to skip a bit to a letter, but I will let people know that I'm not reading.
Perfect.
Is that good?
It's perfect. Thank you very much, Kat. Take it away.
So I'm reading from the very first chapter, which is the Penitence Tower. From the outside, the Penitence Tower is squat and imposing, black stone and a bare pelt of mosses in orange and green. It stands alone on its nub of hillside and looks down on fallow fields. I first saw it at age 16 as the caravan of coaches and horses and treasure brought me to your rolling lands. I was a replacement bride, an unexpected sister. I was in mourning, fierce and wrathful, determined to hate this bitter green country. I would love you, I told myself, and nothing else. I would save you from a fate like mine. I didn't even know you, and already I thought I could set you free. The coaches had traveled hundreds of miles along the roads that webbed and divided the 8 duchies of Vestjaric. I'd come all the way from Petrel, far to the northeast, where the world was half underwater, where forest rose out of frozen lakes, and where old gods still walked under old wood. The duchy of Uri was warmer, greener, and the trees fluttered welcome, the lamb lands sweet and grassy. The cities and villages we passed were bright as painted toys, rain-washed, smelling like rising loaves. My father took us through them all, burdening his wagons with trinkets and books. At night, we would eat in the houses of farm lords and border lords and river lords, and we were welcomed. Everyone knew who I was going to be when I grew up. I think you understand that much. We never had a choice. There was no chance for us to find out what we would become. We were bred and molded and bartered. My sister was going to be your stepmother, and I was held in reserve, ready to be neatly tied to whichever family my father believed would best benefit the patrols. I was never meant to come to you dressed in engagement gowns, sitting on a wagon load of gifts for your father. I was still weeping. I was still filled with guilt, and the closer we drew to your castle, the more I realized how out of place I was. The deep forests were gone here, the bears and wolves eradicated. This was never my story. It was the penitence tower that held me and made me hope I would find my own place. In all that gilded splendor, it was the one thing that stood out, raw and rotten. I remember asking my lady in waiting what it was, and she told me that it was the tower where traitors were sent before they were executed. So you see, you are not so civilized after all. The tower is different on the inside. I am right at the top in the rooms below the conical roof, and though the windows are too small to slip through, I can see the whole of Uri spread out around me like a map. It is so very beautiful, even now. There to the north, the violet ridges of the mountains, their caps permanently white, their robes of aspen and apple falling down to their ankles, trimmed in gold and saffron. The seasons are changing fast, the nights crack with frost. It can get very cold up here. I don't suppose I shall have to worry long about that. For the most part, I try to look to the horizon and the distant forested mountains where I wanted to escape to. Better than to look down, dizzy, and see what is waiting for me. Below is the square and the scaffolds and wood that the men are bringing hour by hour. The ground is silver wet in the morning, and the faggots must be damp and black and soft as autumn earth. Perhaps that is a mercy. Is it yours? Do you want me to breathe in smoke and die unconscious, never feeling the flames? It would be like you to show mercy, but not so likely when you have Lilica whispering in your ear. I wonder what she tells you about me. Some of it is probably true, but there has never been a cat so good at snarling up the truth as your friend Lilica. How does she look to you, I wonder, through that blinded eye of yours? Do you see what she is? There is someone knocking at my door. It's amusing, these little pretenses. Whoever it is, they will curtsy and call me pretty names, even while they make my pie ready. I can't open my own door, but I can draw myself straighter and wear my Duchess mantle and tell them, enter. So gonna take a jump forward to where she's been given some writing material so she can write a final letter to her stepdaughter. The pen and nib are heart-achingly familiar. They were a gift from you on my wedding day. I smiled at the wooden kit. Genevia must have packed it. I can imagine her arguing with the servant, her words hooked and sharp. Why give a woman in the traitor's tower an entire embroidery set when all she means to do is stitch a peasant's shirt? I slip the kit into the deep pocket of my skirt and take the writing equipment to the table. Once I've cleared myself a little space, moving aside the empty dishes, and refilled my wine for courage, I write your name, Silviana. I cannot call you dearest, as I think we have moved beyond meaningless rituals. But perhaps I should. Perhaps I should tell you that you were always meant to be my dearest Silviana, and that it took many harsh twists to change the thread of our love to hate. And I wanted to love you. It seems unlikely given what has come between us, but that day I arrived at your father's castle, I was determined to be something to you, a friend, if not a sister. Never a mother. The thought was too ridiculous. I was 6 the day you were born. After a year of mourning, your father made plans for a new wife, and my own father, always quick to take any deal that worked to his favor, offered up my sister as a bride. It was a deal quickly done. Despite my family's reputation for certain unsavory practices, there was no doubt that tying his duchy to my father's was in Duke Calvi's best interest. We held back the East, useful in times of war, useful if you plan to make yourself a king. To my sister and I, still girls, and still in that strange land that only girls can occupy, the upcoming wedding was barely real. It would be years before my sister left to join your father in his faraway turrets and become the stepmother to a girl we knew only as a motherless, nameless babe. You were not a person to us, and I doubt you, as a mewing child, cared much. You accused me of witchcraft, Sylviana, but it was no craft of mine that killed your mother or my sister. No spell that tied my family to yours. The words of men chose this day for us. If there were spells that could have raised the dead, do you not think I would have called my sister back from the dark? I wanted her, not you. I never wanted you as my sister, but you were all I was given.
Oh, thank you so much, Kat. That was really excellent. And, you know, scary. Can I say scary? It was scary. And, you know, it obviously setting us up for a wild ride. And, my goodness, I'm not going to say anything else, okay? I'm not going to say anything else because, yeah, absolutely. But this was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much for giving us a glimpse into the book. All right, so we, as we speak, pre-orders are now open for Cast Long Shadows. We have some events planned as well. We are going to be in Glasgow at Satellite. So if you happen to join us there, we will have a book launch. We will have some celebration together. So, and if you happen to come to Satellite, you might even be able to get your copy a few days before release. Absolutely. So that would be quite exciting. Yes. Oh, yeah. And then the following week, of course, when we get to obviously the release date, that's the 31st of May, which is then followed by the weekend in Edinburgh at Chimera. Now, Chimera is Edinburgh Festival of Science Fiction and Fantasy, organized by Anne Landman at the Pleasance. The website is up, so you can find out already about the full lineup. And of course, Kat will also be on the program, so you get a chance to hear from Kat directly, and there will be copy available. You will be able to get your copies directly through Luna Press, but of course through your usual retailers. And the book will be available in both paperback, hardback, and digital. So all formats, not just both, but all formats.
Lovely. I didn't realize it was a hardback. No, exciting.
Yes, absolutely. Now there is also a very special collector edition, which is only available on the Luna Press website. That edition is numbered out of 50, and it will have a very personal touch from Kat. So if you're interested in the special edition, you will find there on our website with all the dates and the details about the release. Okay, so you can find all the links in the description of this video, and you'll be able to see it. Now, I think what's happening after that is the excitement, of course, of the Edinburgh International Book Festival. We always find the Luna Press books in the bookstores, so you'll also be able to find Kat's novel, Cast Long Shadows, at the Edinburgh Book Festival store, both online and in person. And finally, of course, we have FantasyCon coming up in September. So the book, of course, will be available there at our live events. And with that, all that is left for me to do is to thank Cat Hellisen for being with us tonight and for spending some time with us all, talking about writing in South Africa, and of course, talking about Cast Long Shadows. So it was lovely having you here, Kat. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm a writer. I love to waffle on about my writing.
Oh, and thank you all for joining us tonight on the live premiere of our book launch with Luna Press. So good night from me. Good night from Kat. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Good night.